Hidden messages keep key details like the hotel reservations or flight times visible and accessible. Event invites bring structure, while high-res media ensures clarity across devices, so you can easily share incredible vacation days. And with end-to-end encryption, conversations stay completely private. Even podcast hosts can benefit from WhatsApp by pinning episode themes, collecting audio clips, or sharing new show logos. It's time for WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone. Support for HiddenBrain comes from LinkedIn. When you own a small business, the workday doesn't end at 5. Your business is always on your brain, even on days off. So when you're hiring, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That hiring partner is LinkedIn Jobs. You can easily post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates that you can manage all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature helps you write job descriptions and quickly reach the right candidates with detailed insights. At the end of the day, the most important thing to your small business is the quality of candidates. And with LinkedIn, you can feel confident that you're getting the best. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/HB. That's linkedin.com/HB to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This is HiddenBrain. I'm Shankar Vedanta. Perhaps you've had the experience of driving to an important event. You're running late and you decide you want to outsmart all the other drivers who are stuck in traffic. You take a side street because you know it's a shortcut around the traffic jam. 3 blocks later, you realize the shortcut isn't a shortcut. In fact, it doesn't get you where you need to go. What do you tell yourself in moments like that? Do you say, oh, I got that really wrong? Or do you say, my sense of navigation is impeccable, except for this one tiny mistake? Philip Fernbach is a cognitive scientist at the Leeds School of Business at the University of Colorado Boulder. Phil, as a cognitive scientist, you've studied how humans can be so brilliant, but also really dumb. That feels like a paradox.
That is a paradox, and that is the paradox at the heart of humankind, I think. On the one hand, we've visited the moon and created incredible artificial intelligence and all these other sort of almost magical abilities. On the other hand, everybody knows that people can engage in behavior that's incredibly ignorant and extreme and foolish. And we've all done it ourselves, and we've all seen it in others.
So researchers who study the mind have come up with a term to describe why our own ignorance is often hidden from us. They call it the illusion of knowledge. What is this illusion for?
The illusion of knowledge is the idea that we think that we understand the world in much greater detail than we actually do. In cognitive science, this is sometimes called the illusion of explanatory depth. There was great research done by a psychologist at Yale named Frank Kyle and his colleagues in the 1990s, and that's precisely what they were interested in. How well can people understand how everyday objects work, things like toilets or ballpoint pens or zippers? And in these studies, what they asked people to do was to first just give a sort of impression of how well they understand things. And what's fun about this experiment is that your listeners can actually do this experiment on themselves right now. So think about it. How well do you understand how a toilet works? And if you're like most people, you're kind of nodding your head right now and saying, well, I have a decent understanding of how a toilet works. Do you think that somewhere in your mind is something like an annotated plumbing diagram that you could tell us about? But here's the trick. In the next part of the experiment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to explain to me in detail exactly how it works. And when I do that, something really remarkable happens. People reach inside and they realize they have just about nothing to say. It turns out that we tend to know remarkably little about the way that the world works. And yet, that initial impression we have is that we do understand in a lot of depth. And that's what Kyle called the illusion of explanatory depth. and is sometimes referred to more simply as an illusion of knowledge or an illusion of understanding.
So when it comes to something like a toilet, I think most people imagine, you press a handle and water flows into the bowl and the toilet flushes, and that's how the toilet works.
So that's actually, most of the time, pretty much all you need to know about how a toilet works. Until the toilet breaks and you have to fix it, and then you realize, actually, there's a lot more going on.
At this point, you may be asking yourself, how do toilets work? I asked Phil to test his own knowledge, but he declined to offer an explanation from memory. As he put it, he's learned it about 10 million times, but can never retain it. So here he is, reading the explanation.
So the most popular flush toilet in North America is the siphoning toilet. And by the way, this is a really ingenious mechanism that was created. Its most important components are a tank, a bowl, and a trapway. The trapway is usually S or U-shaped, and it curves up higher than the outlet of the bowl before descending into the drain pipe that eventually feeds the sewer. The tank is initially full of water, and when the toilet is flushed, the water flows from the tank quickly into the bowl, raising the water level above the highest curve of the trapway. This purges the trapway of air, filling it with water. As soon as the trapway fills, the magic occurs. A siphon effect is created that sucks the water out of the bowl and sends it through the trapway down the drain. It's the same siphon action that you can use to steal gasoline out of a car by placing one end in the tank and sucking on the other end.
Let me try and say it back to you to see if I can test my own illusion of knowledge here. What I think it's saying is that you have this S-shaped curve in the pipe behind the toilet bowl, and as you flush the toilet, it's filled with water. It starts to fill up this S-shaped pipe, and as it fills up the pipe with water, the water basically pushes out the air, creating something of a vacuum on the back end of this S-shaped pipe, and the vacuum then suctions the rest of the water inside the bowl out into the drain. How did I do?
Well, I think we should test that with a plumber, not with me. I think you did a pretty good job.
What you're saying is I should stick to podcasting and not plumbing, is the advice I'm giving you.
I think we both should. But what this highlights is just how complicated the world is. Whoever thought? There's this ingenious mechanism in this object that we use every single day and we never think about.
So, talk a moment about how the illusion of knowledge in some ways is a product of the way the human mind works and its limitations as it interacts with this extremely complex world. Why is it that the workings of the world are so hard for us to wrap our heads around?
I think this reflects a really deep fact about the nature of the mind and what thinking is actually for. Thinking evolved to make us more effective at acting in the world. The world is extremely complex, and to be able to choose effective actions in the world really requires acting in environments that are very different from one another. We almost never see the same exact situation arise twice. And so our minds have to be really effective at generalization. They have to understand that this situation is similar to this situation in some way to be able to act effectively. So storing a huge amount of detail about the world and the way that it works is actually counterproductive. What we really want to do is throw away all of the irrelevant detail and just retain the deeper principles, the deeper generalizable structures that are going to allow us to choose effective actions.
And of course, this must be true for all manner of different things in the world. Everything from bacteria to how trees work, to how a hurricane works. All of these in some ways are complex phenomena where we have a general understanding of what bacteria do, a general understanding of what a hurricane is, but not the exact mechanics of what's actually happening at a granular level.
That's exactly right. The world is so complex when you start digging into the details of almost anything. you realize how complicated it is, and that you don't necessarily appreciate that complexity off the bat. I remember hearing a story about a rock, paper, scissors tournament. Do you know the game rock, paper, scissors?
Yes, yeah.
Very simple game, right? It seems like there's nothing to learn and nothing to understand about that game. How could you have a tournament? You just throw randomly.
Right.
Well, actually, it turns out that there's a group of people who have gotten really good at rock, paper, scissors. And what do? They master the details of how the human mind chooses what to throw and how it engages in pattern matching and other kinds of things. And they can identify certain kinds of patterns in what a more novice rock, paper, scissors player will do and take advantage of that.
I see. So in other words, if I'm a novice, there might be certain patterns that I slip into unconsciously without realizing I've slipped into the pattern. And if you're an expert, you sort of can take advantage of that.
That's exactly right. It's a funny kind of dumb example, but something where when I first looked at it, I said, there is no way that somebody could develop any level of expertise in that area. But it turns out, no, there is actually something to be learned there.
So we can see the problem with mastering too much detail about the world. When we look at people with a very rare condition called hyperthymesia, what is this condition, Phil? How does it work?
Yeah, this is a super fascinating example. So hyperthymesia is also called highly superior autobiographical memory. And these are people who literally remember everything that's ever happened to them. And so you could talk to a person with hyperthymesia and say, what happened to you at 10:30 in the morning on August 15th, 1985? And they can relate to you exactly what occurred. They basically have perfect recall. So before I describe how our minds are very good at throwing away irrelevant detail, if you have hyperthymesia, it's the opposite. You retain everything that's ever happened to you. It sounds like a superpower, but it actually makes life really difficult. There's an amazing short story by the Argentinian writer Borges, which is called Funesta Memorias. And it describes exactly this: a man who falls off a horse and develops perfect autobiographical memory so that he remembers every little detail of his life, and it drives him crazy. And that's because the purpose of thinking, the purpose of cognition, is really not to store detail. It's to throw the detail away, to be able to generalize. And that's such an important function of cognition. If you have this hyperthymesia, it actually makes life really difficult.
So what I hear you saying, Phil, is that in many ways it's actually more efficient and more effective for us to discard a lot of details, or maybe even never learn the details in the first place, and stick with this very generalized, understanding of the world. So the problem is not that we don't know everything, that's just a human condition. The problem is that most of us think we know more than we actually do.
In fact, it would be futile to try to know everything. The world is just way too complex. We've already talked about that. There's just no way that an individual can know enough about the world that it would be effective to store all the details about everything. That's just part and parcel of what it means to be a human being. It is a problem that we don't appreciate the extent to which we don't understand.